Hi everyone, I'm Lorraine Driscoll, and this is another episode of Building Better Brains, where each week I talk about the root causes of why your child might be having a hard time reading, learning, and behaving, and what are some solutions that reach way beyond the limitations of IEPs, medication, and endless tutoring. Last week, I talked about nutritional deficiencies and the importance of nourishing the brain. And I talked about that actually the last several weeks. And today I want to talk about something that drives me a little bit crazy, to be totally honest. I hear it all the time. I see it on Facebook groups. I hear it in meetings. It's just plastered everywhere. And that is that dyslexia is genetic. So while dyslexia can definitely have a genetic component, there is no actual dyslexia gene. In fact, there is no gene, first of all, there's no gene that decides this human will not be able to read. And there are several genes or countless genes that influence countless biochemical functions and processes in the brain and the body that are responsible for reading. And I'm going to give you a quick example to kind of put that into real time. So there is a strong genetic tendency in certain families for people to have difficulty converting omega-3s into DHA, which is what the brain needs and the eyes need for various processes, very important for reading and learning. And if it's deficient, then there often can be reading and learning difficulties. And this is why, as I've mentioned in my previous video, children who are dyslexic and dyspraxic, that is the nutrient that they tend to be most deficient in. This does not mean there is nothing you can do. So dyslexia is genetic kind of ruffles my feathers because it just sounds so hopeless and just like permanent, and there's nothing you can do, and it can be really depressing. So let me kind of lift your spirits. In twin studies, they found that children who, if one person or one twin was dyslexic, there was only a 50% chance that the other twin was going to be dyslexic. So these twins share the same DNA, exact same genetic makeup, but only one of them is dyslexic. So, that kind of just reinforces that phrase that functional medicine is kind of floating around, I should say, in functional medicine communities, and that is that genetics load the gun and environment pulls the trigger. So the leading researcher on dyslexia, she's internationally known, she's out of Yale University, Dr. Sally Shaywich, states that you can't predict who will or will not be dyslexic by examining their genes, that there are many, many, many genes that influence dyslexia, as well as environmental factors. So the belief that dyslexia is inevitable, that it's permanent, makes it seem permanent anyhow. Just that whole idea that there's a strong family history sets us up for the belief that there's nothing we can do, that the fate of our brain, the fate of our IQ, the fate of our child's learning is kind of etched in stone, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. The brain is not like a stone. It's not like a piece of hardware or computer, that just can't be changed and so forth. It's a tree, or think of it as a tree that can be pruned and changed and nurtured and so forth. So every day, or nearly every day, I meet with parents, really worried moms who tell me their child is dyslexic. They were dyslexic, or their husband was dyslexic, and it runs in the family. And they're really scared, they're really worried. And they have little hope almost for their kids' struggles because of their own struggles they went through. And I totally get that. Those reading struggles that they went through, and even as adults, were brutal. They were traumatic. They were detrimental to their self-esteem. They closed often so many doors to different opportunities, or prevented them from taking risks because they were so concerned. So they limited opportunities, but it didn't have to be that way. With all of the research and all of the interventions we have today, we know that even when there's a genetic component to dyslexia, whatever the case may be with dyslexia, that when the right interventions occur, children can learn to read, and they can learn to read fluently. And those aren't my words, that's all of the research that's come out of Yale University on dyslexia and so forth. So Dr. Shaywich, along with many other doctors and geneticists, very much affirm that your genes are not your fate. So I really encourage parents to be careful of how you talk about dyslexia, or if dyslexia runs in the family, how you talk about that, because kids, as you know, hear everything. And at fairly young ages, kids seem to just really buy into that belief system that it runs in the family, there's nothing you can do about it, it's permanent, it's unavoidable. And I encourage you to, instead think of dyslexia like, even though there's no dyslexia gene, to think of it, if there is a strong family history, to think of it like diabetes. Diabetes runs in my family. I don't have diabetes. I don't have any signs of diabetes, but I also lead a really healthy lifestyle, and I do lots that would totally turn down any genetic factors or expressions that might occur. So it's all about what you feed it, how you nurture your genes, how you treat your body, and how you can basically dial it down. So in her book, Overcoming Dyslexia, and I encourage you to check out Dr. Shaywich's book if you haven't done so already, she explains that genes are largely influenced by environmental factors. And those are that dyslexia, genes true as well, but that dyslexia is largely influenced by environmental factors like parents' literacy levels, like toxicity in nutrition, trauma, right? That plays a huge role. They're finding how much of an impact trauma and stress has on the developing brain, and how it can play a huge role in the development of learning disabilities. Socioeconomic background. So that's often discussed, and it's assumed that, if there's a low socioeconomic background, education isn't valued, and neither is reading, and there's not those pre-literacy activities that might occur in families where there's more books and learning and so forth going on at home. But one thing that I think really goes unaddressed is socioeconomic background means often that children are not getting optimal nourishment. And obviously, if somebody's living off food stamps or something like that, then chances are their children are not getting all of those really critical brain, minerals, the vitamins, the amino acids, all of those things that the brain needs in order to read and learn and behave. Other factors that were determined to affect that had nothing to do with genetics was effective reading instruction. So there's quite a bit coming out now on the ineffectiveness of balanced literacy and how we need intensive phonics-based instruction. And we also need to really focus on early pre-literacy skills that occur before we even get into the whole process of reading, and early screening. So even when there's a strong family history, when all the signs are there of dyslexia, I work with tons of kids who are like 5 years old, all the signs are there, it doesn't look, like it looks like they're definitely, if it got out of hand, could be pretty severe. And when we do early intervention and screening, we can really turn things around. So this kind of ties into the field of totally ties into the field of epigenetics, which, by the way, I just think is so exciting, because epigenetics to me offers so much hope and empowerment. It's right up there with neuroplasticity and the gut microbiome, because it's the science of how our genes can be turned on and off by environmental factors like food, like exercise, sleep, toxicity levels, stress levels, and even our thoughts. So if that seems far-fetched, listen up. So you don't need to be a geneticist to influence your genes, even though it might seem that way. And if that, you're kind of doubtful about that, consider that there was a study done, and what they did was they had people meditate for 20 minutes every day. And what they found was that just by meditating for 3 months, 20 minutes every day, countless genes were turned off, and in terms of gene expressions that would have been quite detrimental to somebody's health. And am I suggesting that your child meditate their way out of dyslexia? No, I'm not, though meditation can definitely increase gray matter, cortical thickness, all of those things that are related to improved memory, increased processing, and even a higher IQ. However, meditation can alter gene expression. So, if it does that, imagine what optimal nourishment and sleep and all those other factors can do to affect gene expression. And this is where gut health comes in. So your gut actually holds your genetic coding, or most of your genetic coding. And it also, they found, affects gene expression. The gut bacteria itself can affect gene expression. So a groundbreaking study out of Case Western University found that there were specific gut bacteria that releases nitric oxide. So nitric oxide, they know, affects gene expression. And when this bacteria produced high amounts of nitric oxide, there was disruptions in healthy gene expression. And what this affected was, or kind of genes that it influenced, was genes that were responsible or affected autoimmunity, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, asthma. The list goes on and on. So the gut does a lot more than just, process and absorb minerals and nutrients and vitamins and all that type of stuff. And it also does a lot more than, last week I had talked about how 95% of your serotonin is made by your gut bacteria. So it's no joke when we say the gut is the holy grail of health. It starts with gut healing and nutrient therapy. It's definitely not where it ends. So even when there is certain genes that are really strong, or however you want to say that, we can even influence that with nutrient therapy. So I gave the example of the families that have a strong genetic tendency to have difficulty converting omega-3s into DHA. One tactic to kind of tone down that gene or to kind of deal with that situation is to not only increase the consumption of omega-3s with a higher DHA to EPA supplement, but adding in carnitine, which can help to drive, carnitine helps to drive fat into the cells. So there's so much we can do to, kind of curb the presence, if you will, of genes that can cause some problems. So if you found this video helpful, please share. Hop onto my website, check out my quiz, do my quiz, so that you can learn more about what is going on with your child and what could be some of the root causes of why they are struggling with reading. And there is my program, Reading Rockstar Bootcamp. I currently have a promo for the next 2 weeks. And basically what Reading Rockstar Bootcamp does, it's a 6-month program that combines nutrient therapy and gut healing with cognitive exercises, brain training exercises, and so forth, to first make sure the brain is getting everything it needs in terms of nourishment, and then to basically exercise it and train it so that it's working optimally. Thanks for listening.